The only areas where Ebola is still really present right now in Liberia is actually where we are in Monrovia.
I saw that they shoot people that try to cross the border.
Yeah, because we have a lot of movement still of refugees and a lot of gangs in the area. We have anti-government groups operating in the area. Obviously, Ebola outbreak has been significantly affecting operations.
So let's say someone goes to the bathroom and has Ebola. You go to the bathroom afterwards. Like, do you have a chance of catching Ebola then?
Yeah, small chance. You would have a small chance. It is important to get patients with Ebola into proper treatment facilities. This has been a disease that's had a very major impact on the people living in these three most affected countries.
I remember coming back from Ethiopia, where we did a Gaming for Good event, and we had finally hit that $20 million milestone.
Gaming for Good, what does it do and how did you come up with it?
It's basically just a website where developers donate their games, and when people donate to charity, they get those games for free.
Athene and I always try to focus on whatever we think is the most important and effective ways in which we can make a big difference.
You have raised, in concert with Razer, $9.4 million for Save the Children. That is a lot of money.
Ebola was looking really scary. It had a lot of hysteria, it was all over the news. And then came a CDC report saying that by 2015 we could have as many as 1.4 million cases. Now at the time there was around 6,000-7,000 cases and the world was already in a panic. We immediately thought, like, can we fundraise for it? Can we raise awareness with it? Because it seemed that there were a lot of misconceptions. Can we travel to a place like Guinea, like Sierra Leone, like Liberia? Would an NGO like Save the Children be able to sort of guarantee our safety? Because the reason why we've gone to Mali, why we've gone to Indonesia and Ethiopia, is because it allows us to make it personal for our viewers.
I've already said I'm really proud to be a gamer because of everything you guys have been doing.
I will be showing here the video so you guys can see what you have been doing, the changes you have been bringing.
Looking back and seeing where we came from, the first video I uploaded about the best pod in the world, and seeing where we're now, what we managed to achieve together with you guys, really puts a smile on my face.
Athene has a massive fan base as one of the most well-known gamers in the world, and together we try to use this platform for activism and spreading awareness, fundraising.
We've hit it! We've hit $1 million!
We've hit $1 million! We've hit $1 million!
Turned out there were a lot of obstacles in trying to get such a trip planned and greenlit, and lots of briefings and security clearances, visas, tons of paperwork, mandatory life insurance, medical insurance. Save the Children was remarkably cooperative. We thought they were gonna say, you guys are nuts, we're not doing this.
They've done stunt after stunt and sacrifice after sacrifice, spending 12 hours or more, sometimes 16 hours a day for the past year and a half, live streaming just to raise awareness and funds for Save the Children.
For months and months and months, every day we would have a Skype call with Save the Children. We would talk about planning, we would talk about whether we would be able to get to Guinea or Sierra Leone or Liberia. There would be conversations with the country directors. We'd be going over security protocols and all sorts of things that we had to go through, like medical checkups.
Have you checked with your medical provider to ensure that your trip or medical needs, should you need them, are covered?
You know what are the problems and what are the contagious things you have to pay attention to.
Have you had a psychosocial briefing?
Save is asking all of their staff who are deploying for the Ebola response to meet with a member of the humanitarian staff care.
Have you checked in with the local embassy and let them know that you are traveling to Liberia?
We hope things will be okay before the end of the year.
I was wondering, since we're going to an Ebola hit country, if it's a higher rate.
No, you don't have to pay a higher rate. If you're in good health, you can have the insurance. It's a great risk for yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's great that you do it.
Would you do it?
I wouldn't, no.
Make sure that you've received and submitted all your paperwork, and that's including your medical clearances and things of that nature.
And as if we didn't have enough obstacles in our way already, friends and family were not too keen on the idea.
I guess I'm both excited and scared at the same time.
When I heard that my son wanted to go to the Ebola environment, I was very afraid. I said, no, you don't go.
I think
That my uncle goes to Ebola is kind of stupid. It's actually a dangerous idea, in my opinion.
You hear like crazy stories about Ebola, so you know there's always a risk, I guess.
They have a completely wrong view about it. If I would just bring it up, they would go like, man, you're crazy, you're gonna die. Like even my family thinks I'm gonna die. Like some people think I'm gonna die, but it makes no sense. There is some health workers that do catch it, but they're in direct contact with patients. They maybe miss protocols.
I don't think it's a good idea. I would not do it.
We would of course assure them, look, we're only doing this if Save the Children can sort of guarantee our safety. Can never 100% guarantee it. We had to sign a release form that basically said Save the Children's not responsible if anything were to happen to us. But still, Save the Children was doing all that they could.
You do whatever what you want to do, so I can't say nothing. But it's maybe good to raise money and to make awareness about illness.
Athene, when do you both depart?
Monday. I don't really know what to expect, but we've been gone through a lot of security procedures and stuff. So I know some people are concerned that we might get Ebola, but the chances are really very, very slim.
So we finally got the green light from Save the Children. We finally had everything sorted out. On our way there, we tried to interview some other travelers, but almost none of them were allowed to speak because they were all either NGOs or military or government.
I live part-time in Liberia. I'm from Liberia. I've been helping the Ebola crisis since June. Health issues are a problem. Clinics are a problem. Proper funding going to these ministries and proper medication and proper supplies are very important. Ebola is just one of the few crises or issues that happen in Liberia. More awareness is necessary.
Obviously it affects you. It affects the economy. It's affected every segment of our society.
The disease is very horrible and very dangerous, but it's something that we can contain and it's something that we can prevent. I'm aware that I need to be careful. I'm afraid of not being able to handshake, or I'm afraid of not being able to hug my friends.
Proper funding and proper allocation of funds to the direct channels are definitely necessary.
The moment we landed, you sort of immediately feel the gravity of the situation as you're not able to get out of the airplane without washing your hands and having your temperature checked.
Excuse me, did you wash your hands?
They had a huge tank of chlorine water set up where everybody had to wash their hands, and it said in big red letters, Ebola is real. This is something we were about to see everywhere. You would have to wash your hands before entering someone's house, and you would see how the entire country's behavior has been changed by the outbreak. At this point in time, we hadn't actually announced anything yet. We had deliberately kept it a secret because we knew that people might have tried to convince us or might have even started petitions to persuade us from going to Liberia. And so later that night, we released a video to announce that we were in Liberia.
Hi guys, it's Athene. I'm here in Liberia. We're driving right now from the airport to the hotel. And I'm here with Save the Children. It's one of the countries that has been hit the hardest by Ebola. The reason why we're here is to raise awareness around it. Because the cause is so important, we thought we could come here and bring it closer to you guys. We will also make a documentary about it, talk to survivors. We will go to Ebola clinics. We will be interviewing health workers. We'll give you guys like a window here on the ground.
At first we were in Monrovia, which is the capital of Liberia. Everywhere you go, you would see billboards, inscriptions, wall paintings, all mentioning things like precautions, ways of spotting Ebola, what to do when you're ill. It was omnipresent. We traveled to Monrovia independently, but Phil Carroll from Save the Children would help us travel around Liberia while making sure that we take all precautions and minimize any risk.
So everywhere you go, if it's like a restaurant or a hotel, they'll take your temperature to make sure that you don't have a fever, because one of the first signs of Ebola is that you have a fever.
So what happens if I have a fever?
If you have a fever, then you have to report it right away. It doesn't mean that you have Ebola. You could have just a bad cold, you could have the flu, you could have malaria. The only areas where Ebola is still really present right now in Liberia is actually where we are in Monrovia. If you then start to vomit, or if you have really bad diarrhea, then you become more of like a probable or a suspected case. So they'll probably pay closer attention to you.
I see. So do you go quarantine immediately?
You would probably go to an an isolation room.
I would go to isolation room and then to a medical
they will
center.
observe you for like 30 minutes and then ask you a few questions, if anything, and then it'll call the ambulance to take you to the medical center.
So you have your own separate bathroom and your
little room.
and then an ambulance comes.
Ambulance,
The same stuff that's in there is also in this sponge. And so what you do is before you enter, you just step here and whatever you may have tracked in on the bottom of your shoes is now disinfected.
So let's say someone goes to the bathroom and has Ebola, and you go to the bathroom afterwards. Like, do you have a chance of catching Ebola then?
Yeah, small chance. You have a small chance. It is important to get patients with Ebola into proper treatment facilities. You do have to isolate people with Ebola as quickly as possible.
Everywhere you go, people would be very, very aware and cautious.
Even when they are isolated, healthcare workers will be provided care. It's a very serious disease and most people die from it.
In Monrovia, there are several Ebola clinics and there's a range of NGOs operating in the area. So even though the population density was the highest in Monrovia and it's where Ebola was still the most present, most of Liberia is much more remote and less actively monitored. In many of these areas, Ebola can take out entire families and disrupt entire communities very easily. It was astounding to see the complexity of the work that government and NGOs like Save the Children were doing. Because aside from setting up Ebola treatment units and clinics, the logistics behind containing and tracking the disease were quite complicated.
We had one case where a body was moved up to a village in a taxi and the body was kept between two individuals, and the taxi driver dropped off the body and then went driving off to another town and picked up a few other people. That taxi driver is a contact of the Ebola victim, in this case somebody that we know died of Ebola. There were over 1,000 people from that one person that died that we had to trace. She died in Monrovia, but she died away from where she's from. So they drove from the capital city all the way to the home community here. When they were in the home community, she had a traditional burial. Now, traditional burial normally means that there'll be washing of the body, there'll be family members all around cleaning it, preparing the body and doing it properly. And the father of the woman that died was an important local chief, bringing in lots and lots of local people because they wanted to show respect to the important members of their community. We find out that she's been buried and we get a swab of some of the clothes that have been wrapped around her. That swab comes back as Ebola positive. So then we know that the dead body has moved all the way from Monrovia up 3-4 hours with two people holding up the dead body and a taxi driver driving to get back to the community. So you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And on the same day, 15 meters from the house of the chief is the election. So you've also got lots of people coming to vote on the very same day that all of this is happening. So what we had to do is then track down through our community health volunteers all of those people, including the taxi driver that had gone to another city and picked up some other people, and find out the people that he picked up, just to make sure that we could keep a watch on them, provide the right kind of information, and therefore track that if they had any of the symptoms, we could then quickly pick up on them and encourage them to go to the CCC or the ETU very quickly. And if we don't get those people, if we don't do our police work and find out who all of these contacts are, you have potentially people running around who could infect a new group of people and start what we call a hotspot, a new hotspot elsewhere.
We traveled by car for 4 hours to get to the more remote area of Bong County.
I told you guys I would keep you guys daily posted with videos. Being here is completely different than actually reading upon the crisis when I was back home. When you're back home, you just think about statistics and numbers and you have certain ideas about the situation here on the ground. But you really see how an entire culture has been completely changed and has done dramatic changes in the way they interact with each other and such. Like, people don't touch each other, they don't shake hands, they don't hug, they don't give kisses or anything. Liberia used to be a very warm country where people were very intimate in their interactions. What's really crazy is meeting those children that actually survived Ebola or have lost people, parents or sisters or brothers because of Ebola. It's really heartbreaking to see how every single number that I've seen on pages when I was just looking up the count of Ebola and stuff, how it translates to actually real stories here on the ground.
We came by a football stadium that had been transformed into what was called a holding center. It would be used to isolate and monitor people who could potentially have Ebola.
Once somebody came in contact with anyone that was positive, they were brought here for observation for 21 days.
So they have to stay here for 21 days?
Yeah, 21 days.
Even if they are not sick?
Even if they are not sick. In the home, a family, and one person came down with Ebola, the entire family members of that house is brought here.
This has been enforced on people? Like you have to come here, or is it?
Of course.
So it's not voluntarily, they cannot come here, decide whether they come here or not?
It was not voluntary.
Have people tried to climb out of here? And
Yeah, at times on several occasions we faced problems. So it was not an easy task keeping people here.
Yeah, and was there sometimes fights inside?
Some of them fought among themselves. Sometimes they force this place, get out. We have contact tracers in the community that came across such people, and they talked to them, told them the importance of coming here. A good number of them while here came down positive, and then they were transferred to the ETU.
So when you're here in quarantine for 21 days, like I'm just trying to imagine, what do you do in here?
They are just here, and sometimes during the evening hour, we show movies, to entertain them.
I see.
Yeah, and we feed them 3 times every day. Sometimes they brought football for the children, to keep busy.
I see.
Yeah.
Those tents are basically used to sleep in?
Yeah, that's where they sleep during the day. Sometimes they come out and sit in here.
Did you ever think you were at risk by working here?
Oh, definitely. Even when they came to serve them food, the cooks had to dress in their PPE to serve food.
What if, like, hypothetical scenario, one of your family would have Ebola? Would you also come in here for 21 days?
Yes. Yes.
There is something I wanted to ask, because the country director has brought something up. There is a lot of people that try to evade the fact that they might have Ebola because the community rejects them.
When people were discharged from here, and sometimes to go back in the community, community people, they now want to accept them. And in fact, some community people, when they saw that somebody got sick in the home, they in fact blow alarm. And that's one reason why we had to go and get them out to bring them here, because community people rejected them. And so this was also a safe place for them, because if they remain in the home, nobody will interact with them. Nobody will say anything to them, and they will not go anywhere. So this place was safe. They were here, and we provided almost everything.
So yeah, basically it works both ways. It's not just like being here was being isolated, since people that were potential Ebola infected were already rejected. This was actually a way where they could socialize still with other people.
Yeah, this was a safe place for them. In fact, some of them, some walk here voluntarily. Some came because when they knew that their family came down with Ebola, so people began to keep far away from them. So the only better place they could come was here, because from here, if you are discharged, you are given a certificate. So you go back in the community, they know that you are free.
One thing we noticed from uploading our daily videos from Liberia was that there was a lot of negativity and misinformation.
I just woke up. I was going through the video because we're in the hotel and we have some very limited internet, and I was reading a little bit through the comments. There is quite a lot of people that are very supportive of the trip, but there is some of the upvoted comments that are really depressing. It's really crazy to think that some people have certain ideas. It's not like Ebola is a curse upon just Africa. It might have as well have happened in South America if the virus would be there. Some people have a misconception that it's an African disease and that people deserve it here. It's really crazy to see that they even get upvoted. I know it's not the majority, and I know that there's also a lot of support. I really hope that trips like this can change those people's minds, because we're just all people, We
have to start thinking about these diseases from a global context. I think sometimes we can say that Ebola is over there, wherever there might be, until it reaches our shores. So we saw this in America when the first Ebola case happened in Texas, the doctor in New York City. So this is something that the whole world needs to address. It can't just be something that is dealt with in Africa. I think this was an extremely important lesson that we learned, that these diseases demand the world's attention.
These are like one of the most upvoted comments on the videos that we put online. What do you think about it? Like, because you work here, you also like risk your life in a sense to be here.
That makes me really sad, actually. I think the money that has gone into Africa has not been spent in vain. Some of the fastest growing economies are here in Africa. You see that once you're on the ground. You don't see Africa the way that it was portrayed, say, in the 1980s during the famine in Ethiopia, where kids were starving. It's still an area of the world that deserves our attention. With foreign assistance, we've seen that developing countries, say like South Korea for instance, because of the aid that was given to South Korea, they're now a donor, so they're now helping the developing world. We can't just turn our back on a population that is this massive, and as human beings, I think just from a moral perspective, if someone in your family was hurt or suffering, I think we have to treat Africa the same way. We're all part of a global community.
One way in which we thought we could raise awareness other than our YouTube videos and the documentary was through Reddit. Some people describe Reddit as the front page of the internet. It's one of the most popular websites online, and it's a little bit like a news site, but where readers can post links and articles themselves and get to decide what is on the front page by upvoting or downvoting items.
We traveled to a remote place here in Bong to visit an Ebola survivor. He's a 14-year-old kid. We explained the idea of doing a Reddit AMA and he was interested in doing so. For people that just want to have a better view on it, you guys can follow the AMA. We will put a link in the description.
When we made a post on reddit.com saying that Mohammed, as a 13-year-old Ebola survivor, would be open to answer questions online, thousands of people started posting questions. Mohammed's story was upvoted to the top 3 items on the front page and got picked up by news outlets like the BBC. Responses were incredibly positive and encouraging, and it was great to see how much it raised awareness and connected people with what things are really like here in Liberia.
He lost his own little sister and also his stepmother, and it's just crazy to see that for them this is a reality. Like to us, when we're back home, we hear it, we talk about it, we see it in the news, but was it psychologically painful?
I was thinking that I myself never make it.
I thought I would never make it.
Mohammed answered all questions, whether they were sensitive and about family members he had lost, or whether they were silly, such as what flavor of ice cream he prefers or whether he'd like to have an Xbox. He didn't know what ice cream was and had never heard of an Xbox.
Great to see you survived such a horrible illness, and thanks a lot for doing this, AMA. My question is, what is your dream job when you grow up?
Work.
Do what?
I work for NGO.
NGO. Mohammed spends most of his days working as a mechanic, repairing motorcycles and cars. He said that the way Ebola had changed him was that he now wanted to go to school and in the future work for an NGO. Many people like Mohammed survived Ebola thanks to the help of Ebola treatment units, like the one we were able to visit in Bong County. The Bong County ETU was run by the International Medical Corps and funded by USAID. It's one of the many treatment units where health workers risk their lives to test whether people are Ebola positive and help Ebola patients survive.
We just put our feet in our shoes in chlorine water and had to wash it, and we gotta do it again twice. We're now at the ETU center, an Ebola treatment unit. An ETU, that's how they call it here.
When our ambulances or any other ambulance from the community gets in, 2 sprayers will be dressing at that time because they need to spray the ambulance outside and then help the patient unload and spray the ambulance inside with chlorine. So this is our triage area.
Are we allowed to enter?
Yeah, if you just soak your, so the soap here. Here we dress on light PPE, which consists on goggles, disposable gown, mask and gloves. Then we access the triage where the patient will be sitting. Yeah, this area is like every shift sprayed and decontaminated, but we are not allowed to be there without the light PPE. Yeah, so then when we are wearing our light PPE, we'll step in there, and then the patient will be sitting there, like more or less 2 to 3 meters away from us, but we're still protected. Yeah. Then we interview the patient history and for like symptoms, when the symptoms started. We always explain the patient what to expect, that we are going to take blood from them, that we are going to look after them, give food, give medication, and then if they test positive, they will have to be transferred to our confirmed ward. But if they test negative, we will discharge them. Or if they need further treatment, like more IV or further studies, they will go to the county hospital, which is Phoebe Hospital near here.
What is it that drives you to risk your life to save your own people while even your own community actually like stigmatizes you? Like, what is it?
We were motivated because we saw people dying on a daily basis.
It was a difficult situation. Everybody had fear, of course, initially. If we could do it again, like you said before, if we could do it initially, we will go back, we can still do it again more. We can still do more.
I have my families living around here, and there was a need to make the community safe for people to live. If we had not come here to work and the international community have not come to our rescue, then we are living a nightmare. Yeah. But because they came, and we already had a passion to do it, but we needed help. But it was now an easy task to even receive the first Ebola case, to touch the first Ebola patient. But we started it, and we saw that there was joy in seeing people who had no hope. And we came and started to help them, and all of a sudden we saw these people getting well and becoming part of the community again. That gave us even more courage to go in to help people who are even really, really sick.
To be working here, for me, is a great privilege. To be working alongside the staff that we have here is an incredible privilege. These are some of the most hardworking, dedicated, enthusiastic, positive people that I've ever had the opportunity to work alongside.
When I first came to the ETU, where I met people, especially in the confirmed ward, dying, and I had to wear the first time in PPE, going in to feed a patient, to talk to a patient, psychosocial support given to a patient. It was kind of memorable for me.
I was just before the door where the nurses were struggling to help the patient. The person has fallen on the floor, from the bed to the floor. And so this nurse said, come and help. Let's take her and put her back on the bed. I almost said, no, it's not my duty. They said, come, George, come. So that's how I went and helped and lifted a huge somebody, placed her back on the bed, and we tried to help her, cover her with some cloth. And then I started thinking, have I collected Ebola? Before even we would come to complete our round with the psychosocial aspect, the patient gave up. She died. I still continue to remember that particular instance, and it's memorable for me.
You're one of the first nurses that were here, one of the first 3.
When we got here back in September, Monrovia felt like a ghost city. Like everyone was super scared. We trained in MSF for 5 days before coming here and opening this ETU, and like the situation was really horrible. Like people like dying on the streets, and they were opening in the morning at 8 for new patients, and at 12 they had to close because they were completely full.
Patients were just testing positive every day, left and right. We didn't have enough bed space for them. We were trying to scale up, but the numbers were so huge that we couldn't absorb them. We provide 24/7 care, so it was like not only round the clock care, but it was everyone was just on like speed 11, right? So it was amazing to see just the perseverance that all of our staff had, and to see the patients, the ones who recovered, to see them really push through to fight for their lives, despite knowing that there may be some repercussions with resistance from communities or some stigma, that they were pushing forward, and to see families surround their loved ones. We have visitor spaces where families can come and visit their family members of patients. We keep a safe distance between them so that there's no risk.
Okay, right now there is a patient coming in, and we're not allowed to shoot anything, but we will shoot like the way they are taking precautions and putting their suits on. But because of the stigmatization, we're not allowed to shoot even the car that comes in and drives him in.
We have our Tyvek overalls. We wear 3 pairs of gloves, 1 nitrile and 2 surgical. We wear a mask, we wear an apron, and we wear a hood and goggles, so no skin is exposed. This protocol is that we don't allow any skin to be exposed, just in case of any splash. Almost all the gear that we use for PPE will be incinerated afterwards. Only a few things are washed and reused, such as aprons, goggles, our boots and scraps. So then whenever we are ready, whenever we are completely dressed, we have our safety monitors, making sure that we are doing and following the right steps. We'll go in and maybe in like 15-20 minutes we'll come out. Okay? Just going to admit the patient and assess him and all this. Okay? Thanks.
So what decides whether a patient survives or dies? What is it that makes the difference?
If you get help like early in the stage of the disease, like these both things, help each other. You might get help from the beginning and still die, or you might not get any help and survive. I think we are making a difference in terms of dehydration. Like people at the beginning, when there wasn't any care, they would die only from dehydration. But if you get IV fluids, as we've been giving like a liter every 8 hours, that would help your body to kind of last and like make it able to create antibodies that will fight the disease. Yeah. So what we are trying is like to extend the life of the body to make it able to create these antibodies.
Or sort of try to combine infection prevention and control measures that are very, very strict, because a dead body is when the virus is most infectious. That is what Joshua's team oversees.
The Bong County ETU had been one of the most effective places at helping Ebola patients survive. For patients who do not make it, burials and ceremonies are organized according to very strict procedures.
The body is brought here by those in full PPE, and they come to the entrance. We have a stretcher where the body is placed, and the families are lined up behind the body.
The original graves are at the far left corner, and they came around this way, and the latest ones are most recently in this corner here.
When people come to say goodbye to their family, is the person getting buried while they're standing and watching?
Yeah. When your loved one's being buried by someone in the infection suit, they will psychologically keep a distance anyway. But at the same time, they also want to be close, because that's touch and being close to the body is part of their culture as well. The grave is sprayed with chlorine before the gravediggers start filling. So the gravediggers won't fill the grave until they feel satisfied that the area is disinfected completely.
For the funeral, we invite the family. Yeah. The family will stand a little far distance. Wow, would you like to sing a song? We ask the family, say, yes, we want to sing our last song. And the family will sing. What song would you like to sing? They will sing the song. The pastor, if the person is a Christian, the pastor will read 1 or 2 scripture, sing a song, and conduct the funeral. And then the burial goes on.
A lot of the families would like to do cementing to the grave.
Yeah. Sure.
Because that's part of the traditions, but until we can be assured that the virus is no longer in the easily disturbed, we can't do any of that kind of work with the gravesite until that time has passed.
Because of the crisis, sometimes we used to have 2, 3, 4, 5 persons dying the same day. This has to be done. But this is against our culture, to dig the grave and then wait for someone to die. We don't do it. So it is something that we are doing is against our culture, but we have to do it because of Ebola.
So remember Joseph, the girl? Yeah. JT? Remember I was telling you the survivor? So that's the girl. That's her hand.
Josephine was one of the survivors from the Bong County ETU. A remarkable 9-year-old girl who we had met on our trip. She lost her father to Ebola, and her mother had fallen ill as well. At the time, she only had her older sister to look after her. But she showed such strength and resilience. In fact, what surprised us the most about all our experiences here was how Liberians in general stayed strong and adapted in order to fight and contain the disease. even though just about everyone we talked to had lost someone or knew someone who had lost someone to Ebola. It's not only the domestic and foreign aid that has been responsible for the rapid decline of Ebola cases.
We mustn't see it as those brave foreigners. It's been Liberians, Guineans and Sierra Leoneans who've been fronting up, men, women, children, trying to support their loved ones and their compatriots during this period of time. And because of that, many of them have died.
The devastation that we've seen in communities, within families, how an entire nation has been affected. Normalcies such as school and church and these things have been completely disrupted.
In those countries, Ebola will no longer be a threat, but it will leave major consequences in its wake, and people will have to catch up in many, many different ways, not to mention the permanent scars that will be left from family members having died, from children having been orphaned.
The way that these countries united in changing their behaviors played a key role. At this point, scientists are experimenting with vaccines and cures, and new trials for vaccines in Liberia had just begun the same day we flew back to Belgium.
You know, it takes a really long time to develop a vaccine. It has to go through many clinical trials. The Ebola vaccine has been fast-tracked. Ebola is still a disease, even when it's eradicated from these 3 countries. It doesn't mean it's gone away. I mean, we've seen outbreaks of Ebola in other places for decades.
The greatest struggle with these clinical drug trials is that the number of Ebola cases that they can test them on has now become very small.
There are several drugs being tested. They will not be developed in time to help very much with this outbreak. But if we have drugs for the next time Ebola occurs, and it will occur again, then that will be very helpful.
New Ebola cases in Guinea have fallen to only 40 per week, compared with more than 100 near the end of last year, according to the World Health Organization. Sierra Leone had 80, and Liberia recently only had 5 new cases.
We are going to see the end of Ebola pretty soon in all 3 countries here.
Early results of experimental anti-Ebola drugs are encouraging, but perhaps there is something even more important that the world can learn from these events.
In the 3 countries, Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone, we should not underestimate the impact that this should have, and I personally hope that when we do reach 0 cases of Ebola, we don't all forget about it and say that it's over, because it will not be over. These people will be living with these consequences for many years to come.
Economic growth has stopped completely, and now the economy is going down. Productivity has been destroyed, and rice production and food production has been really impacted because people haven't been going to work. They've been scared of going. Shops have been closed.
Entire families were wiped away by this disease. So there needs to be a lot of attention and resources devoted to getting Liberia, getting Sierra Leone, and getting Guinea back on their feet once Ebola is declared eradicated.
So now we're looking about rebuilding a country, and a lot of people will go away and go, oh, well, Ebola's stopped and it's all fine, and there's, you know, we've stopped Ebola and it's not going to come to Europe anymore, it's not going to go to the US. But now it's the recovery, because you've got health systems that are completely destroyed and nobody to function in those health services, because a high percentage of staff working in the health sector are now dead or a bit scared to come back.
If entire countries can deeply change their culture and their awareness in such a short amount of time, perhaps crises like these can teach us to be more aware of the global community that we live in.
We should not be concerned about Ebola because we're all going to die. We should be concerned about Ebola because there are people, human beings, who live in poverty, who struggle to live their lives just as we do, who are dying and who are going to die. This isn't about us. It's about our bond with humanity, about our concern for other people who are in some ways less privileged than we are, who are suffering from a disease that they don't understand. We don't have a complete understanding of it, and I think we all have to act in solidarity with people.
The end of the Ebola outbreak may be near, but it's how we globally think and respond to these issues in the near and far future that is even more important. On a small scale, it will give children like Mohammed and Josephine a better chance to, for example, get an education. On a larger scale, it'll be a deciding factor in how humanity moves forward.